This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does without me lifting a finger, so I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Yeah, no, I'd not heard of it. And as I said, I was just pleasantly surprised by the cast. Because it's a real, who's who of sort of 2010s comedy. And it genuinely is like every other person that popped up, I was like, oh, it's you. And they absolutely kill it. And I kind of love how, off-kilter and weird, every conversation is. Because, everyone in this town is just slightly mean to each other, in some form or another. Even, the little interactions with, the police or, the delivery guy and all that stuff. It's every interaction is just a bit off.
Hey everybody, joining Flixwatcher today we have Tom.
Hello.
We have Harley.
Hello.
And Kobe.
Hey.
And we're going to be talking about the Kings of Summer.
Thank you as always to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes, and thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for editing this podcast. Please do remember to head over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts, where you can give us a 5-star rating and a massively glowing and happy review. If you want to join the conversation with us on social media, we're on Twitter, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Just search for Flixwatcher. You'll find us.
Hello film fans, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. Our guests today are Tom and Harley. Over to you please, Harley, to say hello to our listeners and tell them a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
Hello, I'm Harley. I run the Fandomentals podcast. It is the podcast that explores pop culture one conversation at a time. I bring guests onto the show, talk about something within the realm of pop culture that they have a deep and personal connection to, and we explore said connection. It goes all over the map. We do film, TV, music, as creative hobbies. I'm pretty fast and loose with the term pop culture, to be honest with you. It's just whatever seems interesting. All three of you guys have been guests on the show, which I deeply appreciate, as well as a number of your wonderful previous guests on the show. So for anyone listening, there are lots of jumping off points and familiar voices.
When you say, I can't remember what the adjective used before hobby was, but what kind of hobbies have people brought to the mix?
I mean, I did early episodes. One was it was non-fiction writing, which was just an excuse to talk to an author that I quite liked. One was running, but it ended up being more ultra running and marathons and that sort of thing. Like people doing 30 days running in the desert and stuff like that, which, yeah, wild. But again, just came my way and I was like, yeah, why not? Let's just talk about it. It sounds fascinating. And I guess songwriting as well is probably another thing, but that's more of a career for a lot of people now.
Yeah, fair enough. Tom, who are you?
My name is Tom and I host a podcast called Proper Mental, which is all about mental health and mental illness. And I speak to people about those things, really, trying to explore them from as many different perspectives as possible and kind of normalise talking about some of the more challenging aspects of being mentally unwell.
How do you find your guests and how are they engaging with you on the show, on the episodes?
Yeah, I kind of find people from all the usual places, really. I've been doing it a little while, so I'm quite lucky enough to be on a lot of media lists and stuff like that. So when people have books out and, I find a lot of guests that way. And yeah, just looking out for stories and things that interest me and trying to come at it from maybe a slightly different perspective. In the mental health space, there's a lot of talk that is all very similar and very fluffy and very light, which is very much not the experience of a lot of people that are having troubles, So I try and sort of dig into that. So it's finding guests who can talk about some of these more challenging aspects, doing specific diagnosis or things that are really stigmatized against or other societal factors. It's very, very difficult to talk about mental illness without talking about sort of politics and society and all these sort of economic factors. So really trying to swim in those waters, really, rather than the more traditional do self-care and it's okay not to be okay.
Fair play. To have listeners, it sounds like definitely an important podcast. More important than our frivolous pop culture based, have a watch on Netflix type shows. But you've chosen today to talk about The Kings of Summer. Can you tell us, first of all, why you chose it? And you got 60 seconds to give us the synopsis.
I'm a sucker for a coming-of-age movie. I'm a sucker for nostalgia, these sort of like American teenage high school movies. I love all that. My favourites are, Dazed and Confused is one of my favourite movies. Stand By Me, all these sorts of things. I've always just loved that feeling of nostalgia. And there's something about that sort of, that excitement of youth that I've always enjoyed. And I stumbled across Kings of Summer not long after it first came out. I knew nothing about it. And I think maybe because I knew nothing, I wasn't expecting anything. And I really liked it. It kind of ticked all those, nostalgic coming of age boxes for me, really.
Okay. And your timer starts now.
The Kings of Summer is about 3 teenage boys who are going through a lot of the usual teenage boy stuff, like overbearing parents and dads that can't connect and pretty high school girls that prefer the older boys with cars. And they decide that all this stuff gets a bit too much and they move out into the woods to build a house that they're going to live in and essentially run away from home. And the film is their sort of adventures in the woods while their parents worry about them a lot. And over the course of this summer of hanging out, they have a great time until they stop having a great time and have a bit of a fallout. And it all leads into a sort of mildly dramatic, quite low stakes ending when the ideal summer has to end with that.
Very nice.
Well, I mean, I thought it was quite dramatic. Yeah, Harley, Helen, I'll go with yourself first, Harley. Had you heard of this before? Had you seen it before?
No, I'd never heard of this, actually,
really?
in the lead up. No, and it was interesting looking at the cast especially, thinking like, I've watched a lot of stuff that these guys are in, so I'm surprised it hasn't sort of come my way via the many internet algorithms. But I'm really glad we checked this one out because I really enjoyed it. Like, I don't watch a lot of coming-of-age films, but whenever I do, I'm really glad that I did because I kind of have similar feelings to Tom in that of, like, there's that little bit of nostalgia and, like, looking back at teenage selves and being like, yeah, I can relate to a lot of this, and, like, those sort of things that seem really big and important at that age, and they're not really when you're, 30 years old and staring time in the face. But looking at this is like just a really nice time of like, oh, it's simple, it's fun, hanging out with your mates. The cast in this is brilliant. The chemistry is amazing. The dialogue, I gotta say, the dialogue in this film is outstanding. Like, it's just a bunch of brilliant comedic actors, so they all just bring their A game, I think, to this.
Helen?
Well, I'd never heard of this either, so I've obviously never seen it. So, yeah, I can be a little bit indifferent on coming-of-age films, particularly when they're American, just because the whole thing about jumping into lakes and wild swimming and doing things like that is just so wildly off our kind of teen experiences that sometimes I find them a little bit difficult to connect with. But I kind of started off a bit suspicious of it, but kind of warmed to it a lot more when they started kind of making their little threesome, the 3 guys, and you kind of saw their friendship come together and how they kind of work together. But yeah, super sweet, really enjoyable, and an hour and 35 minutes. So what's not to enjoy there?
When you say US coming-of-age films, what kind of British or non-US coming-of-age films come to mind when you think of that term?
There isn't many.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, there's like Son of Rambo is one. And then I think like This Is England is like the only like film and TV show.
I mean, that's not as...
That's dark.
But that's like, that is my experience, sort of, because it's set in the Midlands, isn't it? A Room for Romeo Brass. Shane Meadows, really. Is probably... But yeah, because the other like... teen coming of age is all like rich people with pools and shit like that, and I'm like boarding school, or like they have like, I don't know. Whereas
I'm generally trying to think, because when I think coming of age like this, my mind does go to exactly as Tom said, the
Booksmart,
Days
Stand By
Confused,
Me,
all those, which I do love. But when you said it, I was like, what do we have in the UK, or not? Simply not US, which kind of evokes those same kind of sentiments, because I love these films. I don't know why I love them so much, but I think there's something to do with like the endless summer after you've finished school or something like that, where you have got literally no shits to give, nothing to worry about whatsoever, apart from maybe a slightly annoying parent, and maybe now hark back to those days, but maybe then when I first watched them, looked forward to having those days. And this for me is like, this is great. This is the second time I've seen it, and I was quite surprised at a lot of the things. One being the amount of cast members who I didn't know then, which is now a lot more prominent. Or I kind of assumed they were like stunt casting, like maybe Alison Brie, who I was a big fan of Community when this was on. I loved the fact that Megan Mullally and Nick Offerman, who were at least husband and wife couples then, I think they've been off and on, but they were both in this, but playing in different couples. But now, looking back at this, Erin Moriarty, who is in The Boys TV show, then you got people like Hannibal Buress. Who else was there that I picked up there? Eugene Cordero, Thomas Middleditch. There's quite a few people who I just now know from other things, and this is probably the first time I saw them. It's smaller parts, certainly, but they still had kind of an impact.
It incredibly has 5 people from Kong Skull Island in it.
Well, do you know why that is?
Because I don't know.
Well,
they were filming. They decided they liked monsters and decided they were going to do it. I don't know.
The jungle is a type of wood.
Well, no, Jordan Vogt-Roberts went on to make Kong Skull Island. The director of this, his next film was Kong Skull Island.
That's sweet.
So when I always think about like Colin Trevorrow going to Jurassic World, and there's lots of cases like this where first film, indie film, goes to big blockbuster film. Gareth Evans and Edwards, I can't remember which way around it is, the one who did Monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So I always find that kind of interesting, and that's something that I think it happens less nowadays, because I don't think they necessarily have the skills essentially to pull things off, or they've been very lucky. Like, and I think Colin Trevorrow was very, very lucky with Jurassic World and getting that right. And also there's always been like people have noted that it tends to be male directors that get that first indie film into blockbuster. It doesn't, something that doesn't seem to happen to female directors, even though some of them are extremely capable. But I love this. The banter between them, like when they're trying to get rid of Biaggio, but then he becomes like an essential part of the team. We've had those people who kind of just hang around a bit. You're kind of like, oh mate, can you just not be here? But then they just hang around enough that you kind of love them in the end. I'm not quite sure about finding a wood place and building a house. I'm not sure how feasible that is or how much that makes sense, but also it's just like, it doesn't matter. They're just enjoying themselves. No one in the whole area recognised that they were missing, or no one saw them like buying chicken. It's like, okay, whatever. Don't worry about it.
There's a lot
Just
of plot holes. There is a lot of plot holes.
Nick Offerman was an absolute dick in this. Normally he's like a semi-nice guy, at least. At least if he's being a bit of an arse, he's doing it with like a wry smile. But he did seem to be like, I could understand why his son was really pissed off with him, which surprised me.
Yeah, definitely. No, I thought he was great in this. And you kind of really, I think maybe one of the things I like about it is you kind of feel that teenage urge to be like really pissed off with your dad, or you kind of got it. You could see why him and his dad were like banging heads, and why Patrick was so like, well, how is, I mean, he had hives because his parents were like annoying him so much, like we've all been there, right? For flashes of that in teenagerdom, so yeah, there's something nice about that.
I totally agree.
But it's also like with his Nick Offerman as well, like he's obviously a dick, but you can kind of sort of forgive him because obviously they're still kind of hurting after the death of his mum and his wife. And even though he's kind of like trying to move on and bring things back to how it was and bring that normality, he's just kind of like failing at it. But his only defense is to be a dick about it and take the piss out of his daughter's boyfriend.
Yeah.
Who, bless him, was easily an easy target, but still.
When he said, it was like, what the fuck, he just serenaded me. I'm just like, not interested.
A cappella. Something that only really happens in America, a cappella bands.
Yeah.
Maybe they happen over here, we just don't, they're in hiding.
I went to one at Edinburgh Festival and it was quite good fun. But yeah, it's definitely a post-Glee thing. So Harley, you said so you never heard about this before.
Yeah, no, I'd not heard of it. And as I said, I was just pleasantly surprised by the cast, because it's a real like who's who of sort of 2010s comedy. And it's just, it genuinely, it's like every other person that popped up, I was like, oh, it's you. And they absolutely kill it. And I kind of love how like off kilter and weird like every conversation is. Because like everyone in this town is just slightly mean to each other, like in some form or another. Even like the little interactions with like the police or like the like delivery guy and all that stuff, it's like every interaction is just a bit off.
Kumail Nanjiani,
but he just shows up and it's just him and Nick Offerman just going back and forth at each other over like the size
Wontons.
of exactly.
See, hurt people, man. That's that's what it is. Hurt people.
That's the thing. But it's also kind of oddly like endearing in places as well, where you're kind of just like, no one's being really horrible or abusive. Like, that was something I was really interested in, actually, was the fact that well, not so much Biaggio, because you only see his dad like very briefly, and
yeah, you see like his chin.
Yeah, and you don't get the sense that there's anything particularly wrong with their relationship. Biaggio I think is just going along with it because why not? And also MVP of the film. That kid steals every scene. He made me laugh so hard, so much in this movie. But particularly with Joe and Patrick, like, yeah, as you said, Tom, you get their point of view. Like, the parents aren't horrible, like abusive alcoholics or the kind of things that you sometimes see in these films. They're just a bit annoying. And you're like, yeah, as a teenager, everyone has that moment where you're becoming an adult, you've got your hormones, and like, yeah, your parents do just start to grate on you. And like, one of my favorite bits was when Patrick's just at dinner and like Mark Evan Jackson and Megan Mullally just perfect as this duo of just like this. It's like nails on a chalkboard, isn't it? Like, they're just having this really mundane conversation. And just as a teenager, when you're like just out of the loop and you're like, what are you guys, what is happening? How are you my family? Like, everyone's had that moment and you just feel it and you're just like, yeah, I totally get why you would just up and leave and just go live in the woods for a month and just be like, I need some space.
It's like, I mean, I definitely considered it, the whole idea of going and building a fort or a tree house or something. Mm-hmm. But it was really hard and got really hungry. I didn't really make it very far.
I wouldn't get this far. Definitely not.
Yeah, because that was part of it. Is like, because that is that's an astonishing building they've made.
Mm-hmm.
And zero people noticed that.
Especially like his bird box was so abysmally bad.
Yeah. And when he planned it on the paper, it's just like a square and it says kitchen. Like, there's no
like staircase
for the whole thing. Yeah, it's just some lines on a page.
So I don't think. I think you need to think your staircase again properly. That's not going to hold up.
Yeah.
I want to just talk about the Kelly Erin Moriarty bit where, I mean, that's where things fray, and Joe, I don't know, obviously hormones just at that age of like, you have no control of them whatsoever. But also I felt heartbreak for him when you see your friend and the girl you fancy or the person you fancy getting on together. You can see it kind of happening. And then she comes up the stairs to the bed and she asks for the other guy, not you. And I just felt his like, that's a lot of the core of this film, isn't it?
It's devastating, that scene. Yeah. It really is, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have to pause and just sit with that for a minute at all. No, it's fine. It's not at all relatable. Not at all having flashbacks. It's all good. Yeah, when that happened, I was so close to texting Tom, but like, what have you done to me? Like, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah, could have been a very different film after that.
Could have been very different.
2 halves could have gone dark. Yeah,
but I agree. I do like that it went there. Like you said, it's like we've all had that. Oh, I say all. Maybe some of us didn't, but some of us found it a little bit relatable. But it's like, it's just how it is, and you're like, yeah. And as being boys, you'll have fights over it, and you don't know how to express your feelings, and you just punch each other and shout at each other, and it's just super relatable. And like you said, that kind of summer love and that kind of thing, you're like, yeah, that's what happens. I kind of love how it gets resolved at the end as well, where like there's no like deep conversation, it's just they're just flipping each other off in the other car and just laughing and just being idiots, and you're like, it's gonna be fine, they're all good.
Yeah, it tends to be fine, but like I say, 16, 17, 18, when that happens, you fancy someone, they don't fancy you necessarily, or they just get off your mate. It's just like, what? I remember that being the end of the world for a lot of people, like fights like erupting in common rooms.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
They got off with so-and-so!
Yeah, it's something I liked about the whole film is that there were scenes like that were like really emotionally devastating, and realistically we're talking about like the kids have run away from home, so they're like having fun and jumping off cliffs, and the parents at home they're worried and they're sad. So there's like real things at stake, but it is low stakes all the way through. Like that scene is devastating, but it's just a teenage girlfriend, he's gonna be okay. You know, the parents were worried, but they weren't, you know, howling in agony, and you know, they were just a bit worried. They kind of knew what was going on, and I liked that. There was no real jeopardy at any time. Emotionally invested in it, but without having like the shit scared out of me. You know, there was a real nice balance with that I really liked.
Nice. Anything else, guys, want to say before we head to the scores?
I was just going to say quickly, like, there's quite a few like really random moments. Like there's a bit where they trap a possum under a wheelbarrow. And then there's a bit where a really nice bit where he's playing like the violin by the stream. And then the violin makes an appearance again when they have their little party. And just Biaggio is doing this little dance and he's playing the violin. And it just looks like a really weird party. And there's also like a really sad bit where he has to skin a rabbit, which is completely random. But yeah, like you were saying, like the low stakes is where they report them missing at the police station and they're like, they've been kidnapped. I think like maybe they just didn't want to hang around. And yeah, it's that low level kind of worry and like low level not quite being mean to people, but also not being very nice.
Yeah. I mean, like again, with the low level stakes is where at the start, Nick Offerman's like, no, you can't go to the party with your friends at the end of school because my new girlfriend's going to be here. If I was him, I'd be like, what are you talking about? This is the night I've been looking forward to for the longest time since the school year started. And suddenly you pull this thing out the bag. I remember having a massive go at my parents when one of the World Cup started. And my parents were like, okay, so we're going to go and just build some IKEA furniture. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? This is the opposite of what's going to happen. So have you not, at no point in the preceding month have you said this is going to happen on this day, but you would have known, they would have known I was going to look forward to watching the World Cup. And as the first day of it, just like, what's the matter with you as people? So I fully understand.
Tom, this feels like your territory. Do you want to jump in?
Well,
help Kobe work through this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I did like how they dealt with the underlying grief in that household as well, of like the mum not being there, because it was subtle. It was heavy and you felt it, but it was subtle. There was no tears. It was just in the background, just this underlying thing. And I thought that was really nicely played. And something else that I really, really liked about it was like, you know, I've got a real interest in this sort of what society decides that masculinity is, right? And I love that they went out into the woods and they were left to their own devices, and there was a lot of talk about, you know, we can be men, we're going to do what men do. And all that really consisted of was like growing terrible beards and having a beer with their food around the table. But it was really interesting that you had this group of boys and they felt like they were being men, but left to their own devices. It was only a matter of time before they started like wrestling and having races and, you know, like doing really boyish stuff, even though we're there to be men. And I really like that, because I think if, you know, like I'm 43, and if like me and a few of my mates went away for a week, it would only be a matter of time. We'd start off there talking about our kids and our taxes, but it would be only a matter of time before someone suggested a race or a play fight, or, you know, it's just like such a blokey thing to do, is to like be a man and act like a boy. And I don't think that ever stops. And I really like that aspect of it as well. That kind of leapt out at me.
I mean, Tom, you know me, I'm like a big gig goer, and like that's just what mosh pits are. It's just men being boys, just running into each other because the music's loud and it's fun.
I'm going to catch up with my mates from uni, and we live in a house that's 10 guys, and that it's going to be just mayhem this weekend. I know it's just going to, we're not even going to talk about our kids. No one's going to care. And my wife's going to ask like, how's Matt doing? I'm like, yeah, he's fine. What's he up to? I'm like, don't know. We just laughed at each other the whole weekend.
The amount of conversations I have with my wife like that. Like, oh, you saw your mate you haven't seen in 6 months. How is he? I'm like, yeah, he's good. What did you talk about? Stuff.
Reruns of Blackadder.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Helen.
And yeah, Biaggio. When I first saw him, I was like, this kid's going to, I don't know how old he was then, but yeah, like I say, MVP. Just some of the lines he pulled out and his faces and just the way his intonation was and everything. It was just like, I don't know if that was scripted. I don't know if that was just him coming off the dome some of the times, but some of it was just like astonishing.
Yeah,
like
when he needs a spin-off, right? Like that was my thing. Like you'd watch a whole Biaggio movie. He was amazing, yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and like out of all of them, they've all gone on to be in some really, really big films. And he hasn't as much, but he has got by a mile the biggest Instagram following. So so he's really like, he's got people's imagination, you know, without necessarily being in Jurassic World or being in The Boys or whatever.
He's got some really cool films, though, definitely, there's been involved in. There was Monos, which is a really cool film that came out a few years ago, which was set in somewhere in South America. I can't remember exactly where. But I would love to see more of him. Anything else you guys want to say before we do head to the scores? No, let's head to the scores.
I'm Sam Clements, host of the 90 Minutes or Less Film Festival, another podcast in the Stripped Media family, a podcast that celebrates movies under 90 minutes long. Each episode, I'm joined by a special guest who selects a movie to join our prestigious lineup. Past guests have included fellow Stripped Media family members Martin and Sam from Song by Song, and Kobe from Flixwatcher, and Dave from The Wire Stripped. Search for us now on the app you're currently listening to this podcast, or join us at 90minfilmfest.com.
So welcome to the patented Flixwatcher scores. They're always out of 5. You can have decimal places. And we'll start with you, please, Tom, with your recommendability.
I think I'd go sort of 4.5 for recommendability. Like, I've recommended a lot of people to this film, mainly because no one's ever heard of it. Like, I've never met anyone. I've said, have you heard of this film, Kings of Summer? And they've gone, yeah, I've watched it. Like, that's never happened. So, yeah, I do tend to, like, recommend it a lot. And it's been around a while, so I've probably told a lot of people about it. So, yeah, 4.5.
Holly?
Yeah, I'd go with a 4. Yeah, I'd say similar. Like, it's very enjoyable, easy to watch film. Like Tom says, I don't know very many that have heard of it or seen it, and it's easily available. So I'd say, yeah, many people I would recommend this to.
Helen?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a solid 4 as well. It's super sweet. It's really entertaining. There's some laugh out loud moments as well. I'm not sure whether it's going to be like the one like Stand By Me people talk about in 40 odd years time or anything like that. But yeah, if you like those coming of age kind of things and you like that kind of era of TV comedy, then this is the one for you.
Yeah, I'm going 4.8. I've told people about this, and I do have it on DVD from when it first came out. I didn't catch it in the cinema, which I'm slightly disappointed in because I know I would have loved it. I remember Mark Kermode's like championing this when it first came out, so I think that's what turned me onto it. But it's fun. It's an easy watch, and I think lots of different people get lots of different kicks out of it. Oh yeah, one thing I was going to say was after I finished my A-levels and we went on holiday to Kavos, just thinking we were proper like full-grown adult people. And literally not. We're just like idiots, and we're still the same idiots, but just have like mortgages now. Tom, repeat viewing score.
That would be pretty high for me. I'd give it a 5. I've watched it a few times, you know. I've watched it, a few times. I think I was saying to Helen and Harley before you logged on, randomly about a month ago, my wife and I watched it again. We just saw it's on Netflix and just watched it because I hadn't watched it for a while. So, yeah, and it holds up, you know. It does hold up through rewatches. You know, there's a few things I saw watching it this time around because I watched it again at the weekend. And, yeah, there's a few bits that I kind of like questioned that I missed first time when I wasn't so like caught up in the more emotional or comedy aspects of it. But yeah, as a whole, I would probably watch it again in a year or two, no problems.
Holly?
Yeah, again, I put this pretty high. I give it a 4 because I know I'll definitely rewatch it again. Probably within the year, I would expect, because to say it's quite an easygoing movie. I can think of a few people that would enjoy this. I'll probably end up watching this with a few friends very soon.
Helen?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much I'll rewatch it, only having watched it the other night. But yeah, it's quite short, so a 3.
I'm going to go for 4.5. I haven't seen it since it first came out on DVD at least. But when you said it, I was like, yes! Yes, it's about time. I rewatched it, and I was glad it carried some of that magic that I really enjoyed with it. So yeah. Small screen score. Tom?
I'd go for, like, again, a solid 4.5. You know, I think it works. I think it probably would work better on a small screen rather than a big screen, I think. Yeah, I think that's a fine way to capture the magic and for it all to come across what you need for it to come across. And the soundtrack's really good. There was no songs I actually, like, knew or had heard before, really, you know, other than maybe one or two of them. But, yeah, that was really nice, and I think that you're more likely to notice that maybe on a small screen. So, yeah, 4.5.
Harley?
Yeah, I'd give this a solid 5. Honestly, I think it works really well in this way. I think you could happily see this in a cinema. I don't know if a cinema would add a lot to it. There's some really interesting stuff with cinematography in this film that I really appreciated. And as Tom said, the soundtrack's great. But you can definitely appreciate that on any screen, I would say.
Helen?
Yeah, just think about the soundtrack. Some of the MGMT on there. So that real kind of like late noughties sound going on there.
Yeah, I was trying to work out when it was set.
Yeah, it took me a minute. Yeah.
because they had phones, but there weren't any smartphones side of things. Yeah. Sorry, Helen.
I'm going to give it a 5. I think it works really well on your home viewing. It kind of adds to that kind of feeling like you're part of their little gang.
I don't think I've seen any of my favourite coming-of-age type films in the cinema. So, like I say, Dazed and Confused, always been on small screen at home. Stand By Me, never seen that in cinema. Ferris Bueller, never seen that in cinema. I don't think I've seen any of the Ferris Bueller, 16 Candles, or those kind of films. Breakfast Club, I don't think I've seen any of those in the cinema. So I'm going to have to give it a 5, but I think I do want to catch those in the cinema because I'm sure I'll have a great time. And this was fun in the cinema because it is a funny film and it packs a bit of emotional heft, and I love those. It's just nice being out in the summer with those kids. That sounds dodgy, but
there's your cold open.
Yeah. So I'm going to go for a 5 as well, but I definitely would like to see this in the cinema at some point. Engagement score, Tom.
A 5 from me. Yeah, fully engaged, fully on board. Yeah, happy days.
Harley?
I'd go a 5 as well. As I said up top, I think the dialogue in this is so sharp and the performances are so just funny and slightly off kilter that it does draw you in, and you are like immediately put into all of these different relationships and invested right from the off.
Helen?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a solid 4. It's got kind of like that breezy, easy watch along, and it is unfortunately one of those where like every time someone comes on screen, you're like, oh, where do I know them from? And then because you're at home, you have to immediately go and check and go, oh, they're from that. And then you go, oh, they were in Kong Skull Island as well. Like, oh, when did I watch that? So that did happen a little bit.
Do you wish that Netflix had that kind of X-ray or insight that Prime and Apple TV has, where you can pause it and it tells you who they are and what they've been in? Because I think that would stop me watching. It would slow me down watching a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, I'm bad enough as it is with the phone, let alone like pausing it during dramatic moments. Where is that person? Where do I know him from?
I was thinking, who's in A Good Place? Mark Evan Jackson was.
Yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yes.
Was there someone else?
Brooklyn Nine-Nine as well. He was in those two.
Yeah, he's in those. And the female police officer, she's just been in loads of stuff. I'll never remember her name, but who's she in Sunny though? But she's just someone who appears in like episodes.
She's Chloe in 24, wasn't she? Which is where I kind of knew.
Was she?
Mm.
Oh, okay.
And also something else.
Was she a comedic actor? Was she playing like a comedic role in that? Because I've always had her as a comedic kind of.
No, she was like a really sort of job's worth. Was it the CTU agent that got on Jack Bauer's nerves a lot? But I think they ended up being friends.
Yeah. Also Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah, there's loads of people in there. Hannibal Buress is one of my favourite comedians. He's the one that I first heard, but he talked about Bill Cosby as being like as a serial person. That when I heard that from him, I was like, yes, I like this guy. But this is, 4.61250. I gave it 4.5 for engagement score, which is decent. Definitely up there, I would have thought, in the top 20 films that we have. I haven't got the time to check this right now, but it's go watch it, recommend it, share with your friends, and tell us what you think. Harley, Tom, thank you very much for joining us. Tom, thank you very much for picking this film, and can you tell everyone where we can find you both online?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And you can find Proper Mental in all the usual podcast places, propermental.com or at Proper Mental Podcast on, most of the social medias.
And Fandomentals podcast is available on all the usual podcast platforms. It is also on the various social media pages, including Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky.
Awesome. Guys, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
It's been sick, man.
Thanks
Thank you.
so much for coming on.
Bye.
Bye. Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes, and Rockwood Audio's editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.